Hello, welcome back to another episode of Healthy Actions Intervening Responsibly, known as HAIR. I am Jacqueline, the founder and the host. We've talked about a lot. We've covered a lot in our previous episodes. And yet there is still more for us to discuss, to reflect on, to look forward to in terms of the changes that we are going to make on behalf of our children, how we are going to take responsibility for adult behaviors, adult roles, and adult actions on behalf of our children. So today, I'd like us to talk about, usually it's a pretty tough topic. A lot of people don't like to talk about it. They shy away from it. Adults in particular kind of turn their faces against it and want to have nothing to do with even having a conversation about this topic. Yes, we are going to talk about the impact that racism has on our children and how that even ties into children being adultified and perceived to be older than what they are. So let's jump in and let's get to it. So I can remember growing up. I can remember several occasions where I experienced some form of racism. Didn't know what it was called. Wasn't taught about it at all. Having a loving and protecting mother who did her best to shield her children from any harm and injury from the outside world. Oh, she did her best. And so in the climate that we're living in, I very often think about her ways of protecting us from such behaviors. And she did everything she could to shield us from those experiences. Well, as I reflect, I think of those times where I was outside of her presence, outside of the house, maybe even outside of the community where some of those experiences took place. And as I reflect on those, I myself had to embrace and accept the fact that I wasn't seen as or treated as a child. I knew very early in my adolescenthood, knew very early who had resources and who didn't, who was protected and who wasn't, who was embraced and accepted by society and who wasn't. I remember and think about the many times that I watched television. And there were some of my favorite shows, yes, some of my most favorite shows told me and taught me who had resources and who didn't. And as an adult, I very often give thought to those experiences as a way that I can reimagine what it would be like growing up as a Black girl. Reimagine what it would be like to be protected as a Black girl. And so I often give myself those type of exercises. And sometimes I think, wow, I made it through some of those darkest times, darkest moments. Oh, I can remember the times that my mom would drive in the car, my siblings and I, to certain areas of town, and we weren't allowed to even drive through it. I remember things thrown at the car. And as I think about these experiences today, I think about them, again, it tells me I wasn't seen as a child. Because my belief is that adults who see children as children will be careful and mindful and cautious of their behaviors in the presence of children or towards children, to children, against children. So that kind of gives me an idea that I wasn't seen as a child. Oh, there were so many times I thought about and wished that I could change my situation. Oh yeah, I'm being honest and transparent. Many times I wish that I could change my color. Because what I learned through society and on television was that a lot of my experiences and circumstances was based on the color of my skin. So, we're here to talk about this issue today and the impact that it does have on children. And some of the things I've learned, including hearing from children themselves, is how racism causes them to have anxiety, nightmares, sleeping disorders. Many of them wonder what to do if it happens to them, where to turn, who to call. Will they come out of it alive? I mean, there's been a lot of tough things that I've heard children say as it relates to racism and them feeling unaccepted, them feeling socially isolated, them feeling as if they are treated and handled as if they aren't a human being, to be treated and handled as if they don't have feelings. They're not allowed to express their emotions. They're not allowed to fully be themselves. The moment that they be themselves, then a lot of times there are consequences for that. These are things that we need to be concerned about on behalf of our children. Some children have talked about their experiences with what we adults know and understand about microaggressions. There was one child who was talking with me about that and said how much it hurt for him to be asked, so did you grow up with a father? That is one of those microaggressions. You know, the whole message and assumptions that's packed into that, where a child would even think about, so are you going to reject me? Are you going to judge me? Are you going to not accept me if I didn't grow up with a father in my life or in my household? Or are you saying that I can't learn, I'm not smart, I'm not intelligent, I'm not accepted, or I'm not like the other children because I didn't grow up in the household with my father? A lot of children have been saying they don't want to even tell anyone that they're living in a single parent household out of fear of being judged. So that even has caused a lot of anxiety for children in their lives. Some other things that I've heard children to share is that they have been told, particularly teenagers, that they aren't considered approachable and that people are afraid of them, or that they're very intimidating, or that they look hard, or they look aggressive. And the anxiety that that causes, because a lot of times if someone feels that they look hard or They're being perceived a certain way. A lot of times the mind goes into thought patterns of be ready, be prepared to respond, what I might have to do to protect myself. And living like that on a daily basis can be very, very tough. It is very, very tough, especially for a child. Staying on guard, always in this fight or flight mode. That's very traumatic. When you constantly stay and live in fear and wondering what's going to happen next. Many communities, particularly Black communities, are marginalized, are disenfranchised. And with that comes a whole host of other things. How the system perceives families from certain communities. How law enforcement perceives individuals from certain communities. How educators, even physicians, perceive patients from certain communities. I remember working on a project that was with healthcare system. And the project consisted of talking with medical providers on how they perceive their patients. And many of them, their mindset and attitudes about their patients were that they couldn't make an intelligent decision for themselves, or that they were not health conscious, or that when it came to medication, they wouldn't understand, so you just have to tell them what to do. They did not respect the autonomy of many of their patients. And this was all related to how they saw them and the neighborhoods where they came from, rather than treating them as human beings and their right to be treated with dignity and respect. Well, guess what? Our children are treated the same way. They are denied of making decisions for themselves. Where they're able to make decisions and they have reached the maturity level of making decisions for themselves, they're very often denied to do that. Talking more about this topic. So what are you thinking about? Does it stir up any emotions for you? Are you in a moment that you're reflecting? Or are you thinking about some experiences that some of your friends had that they shared with you? Or maybe your family members had. And a lot of times children are learning the responses of the system by family members who have experienced it. Where children might be direct witnesses or even victims of experiences that their families are having with the system. Some children have talked about how afraid it made them when they saw a family member get arrested, or the police pulled over daddy while he was driving the car, and how hysterical it made them. A lot of them have lots of flashbacks and talk about how they felt, what they saw, and even in some cases what they did when the car they were riding in was pulled over by the police, and how it really made them afraid and scared, and how much sleep has been interrupted as a result of that fear. And you know what? How does this connect to adultification, where children are put in adult roles and take on adult responsibilities? Well, so many times our thought is that children should be able to handle the stress and manage the stress just as adults, and regulate themselves just as adults. Bounce back just as adults. Get over it just as adults. And a lot of times we don't consider the impact that these matters have on our children. Let's think about how this even comes across in the classroom. Now, there was a teacher that had shared with me some time ago, and when she had attended one of my presentations at a conference. And she shared with all of us in the room that this one time her group of students came into the classroom. They were dancing to this new popular song that was out. They were pretty loud. And they stepped in the classroom with that same energy and that same behaviors of laughing and dancing and just kind of like, woo. Well, she said they were wild. So she looked at the boys and says, okay, boys, get in your seat immediately. Quit horsing around. And she said, I saw that as, well, boys have a lot of energy. But then when it came to the girls that were in the classroom, now there are two things here. There was a mixed classroom of black and white students. So for the white girls, she pulled them to the side and warned them about their behaviors and the way they were moving their body. And she was saying to them, you know, you need to protect yourself from some adult who might see you grown. And you don't want that. You want to be careful about what you're doing for your own protection. But her response to the black girls were very, very different. Very, very different. She said to the black girls that they were being sexually inappropriate. They were being showing and exhibiting promiscuous behavior. She also then said that they were the ringleaders of it. They were the ringleaders for sexualizing the classroom. And those girls were written up for inappropriate behavior in the classroom. And their parents were called to the school. And their parents were told they were being inappropriate in the classroom. That was very, very clear to those girls. Very clear about how different they were treated based on their race. And a lot of those girls talked about how disappointing that was, how that scarred them, and they were really concerned about that write-up, that teacher's assessment and labeling of them, how that was going to affect their future in school. I remember girls crying about the note going into their student file, that following them. You know, and those girls were pretty sharp individuals. They were very involved in other school activities. They were concerned about their other teachers hearing about this. And that they themselves did not see them coming into the classroom dancing and having a good time with this new song as all the other students were, as it being anyways sexual. And again, they were very, very disappointed that they were labeled that way and that they were handled in the way they were. And they saw themselves as having fun and being energized. And so, do we allow children to freely be energized without labeling it something? And look at the difference in how the boys were talked to. Get in your seats and quit horsing around. And seen as boys have a lot of energy. You know, boys are so energetic, and all you need to do is just basically tell them to just sit down. But with girls, you have to lecture them and scold them and write them up for them to get the message. So there are so many unfortunate experiences that Black girls are having. And the one other thing I like to share and talk about is the dress codes and the impact those have on Black girls' lives. A lot of times it is that one thing about a dress code that could get them kicked out of the classroom or given a write-up or a citation for being out of uniform. And in so many cases, they aren't allowed to be themselves. For example, one girl, the pants that she was wearing, a teacher had a conflict with this student, and she accused the girl of thinking she hard, wanting to be a boy. And that was all based on the type of pants she was wearing, that they looked too masculine rather than feminine. And so on and on and on it went from there, to the point the girl wanted to speak up for herself. She felt how she was being treated was unfair. She felt that how her clothes were being judged in terms of masculine versus feminine was inappropriate and unfair. She spoke up for herself. She affirmed herself, and it caused conflict with that teacher. Even to the point where the whole situation built upon the original incident, and it became a daily situation with her, where it led up to being a whole snowball situation that quickly escalated. Within about 3 weeks, that girl was kicked out of school. And it all started with dress code. So, the teacher, and she admitted all of this to all of us, and gave me the freedom to share it so that others could learn from this situation. She admittedly said, I no longer saw her as a child when she spoke up for herself. I thought this was another woman standing toe-to-toe with me, challenging me. Again, she didn't see her as a child. And she wanted to hold her responsible to her behaviors of what she perceived to be as adult behavior. So how much will we allow our children to express themselves freely without judging it or judging them as being too grown, when a lot of times we put them in those situations in the first place? I certainly hope, I have high hopes that you would reflect and reimagine how we as a society and a community can change the ways that we interact with our Black children by affirming them. You are enough. You are needed. You are loved. You are creative. You are worthy. You deserve to play. You deserve innocence. You deserve nurturing, and you deserve protection. I look forward to you joining me for another episode. I am Jacqueline, the founder and the host of Healthy Actions Intervening Responsibly, known as HAIR. See you next time.